You ever see one of those pictures of a coral reef, just teeming with life, right? And then you see a picture of the deep blue open ocean, and you kind of wonder, where is everybody? It's weird, right? Some bodies of water are like these bustling cities, and others are just these vast, beautiful, but surprisingly empty spaces. Okay, so let's dive into this mystery and figure out what makes an aquatic ecosystem totally thrive or just barely survive. So this is the big question, the core puzzle we're going to crack today. We're going to play detective, gathering all the clues to figure out why a pretty shallow estuary can support so much more life than thousands of miles of crystal clear open sea. And you'll see the answer boils down to a few key ingredients that are, believe it or not, surprisingly hard to come by. And this right here, this slide shows you exactly what I'm talking about. On one side, you've got what's basically a biological metropolis, just packed to the gills with life. And on the other, you've got a biological desert. Now, both are full of water, so what's the deal? What's the crucial difference? Well, it all comes down to one really important concept. And that concept is productivity. The easiest way to think about it is like an ecosystem's total output. It all starts at the very bottom of the food chain with these tiny little organisms called phytoplankton. They're the microscopic plants of the sea, and the amount of them an area can support pretty much dictates how much other life can even exist there. So our question really becomes, what's holding the phytoplankton back? All right, clue number one. This is about the most fundamental source of energy on our entire planet, the sun. You know, in the water, it's just like on land. If you don't have sunlight, you really don't have life. But of course, it's not quite that simple. Sunlight is the fuel. It's the gas in the tank for photosynthesis. Without it, phytoplankton can't create energy, and the entire food web just collapses before it even gets a chance to start. But here's the catch. Water itself isn't perfectly transparent, and that creates a pretty fundamental challenge for anything trying to grow in it. And because of that, water gets split into two totally different worlds. You've got the Photic Zone up top. That's the layer where sunlight can actually get through, and it's where all the photosynthesis happens. It's the engine room for the whole ecosystem. But below that is the Aphotic Zone, a world of literally perpetual darkness where plants can't grow. So the deeper the water, the bigger this massive, unproductive Aphotic Zone becomes. So what can make that precious, sunlit Photic Zone even smaller? Something called turbidity. The best way to think about it is like putting blinders on the ocean. You get all these suspended particles, maybe silt from rivers, or even the phytoplankton themselves, and they make the water murky. This blocks the sunlight from getting down deep, and it basically shrinks the whole area where life can even get started. Okay, so we need light. That's a big one. But there's another ingredient, one that's way less obvious, and it's incredibly scarce underwater. Let's look at our second clue. The very air that aquatic life has to breathe. Just take a look at this number. 150. That's how many times less oxygen is available in water compared to the air we're breathing right now. I mean, can you imagine trying to run a marathon while breathing through a tiny coffee stirrer? That is the daily reality for every single creature living underwater. And there's a critical tipping point, an absolute line in the sand. When dissolved oxygen, or DO, falls below about 3 to 5 parts per million, the whole system just crashes. It is checkout time. You can get mass die-offs in just a matter of hours. So what on earth could possibly suck all the oxygen right out of the water? Well, the culprit has a name that sounds kind of friendly. Eutrophication. It actually means well-nourished, but it is the perfect example of having way too much of a good thing. It's a chain reaction that kicks off with an overload of nutrients and ends with the creation of a totally lifeless dead zone. So here's how this kiss of death actually works. First, you get this flood of nutrients, usually from things like fertilizer runoff, and that causes an explosive bloom of algae right on the surface. This thick, slimy layer blocks all the sunlight, which kills off the plants living below. Then, the algae itself dies, sinks to the bottom, and bacteria start to decompose it. And that decomposition process is incredibly oxygen hungry. It just sucks nearly all the available oxygen out of the water, suffocating pretty much everything else. So we have light and we have oxygen, or a serious lack of it. Our final set of clues is all about the specific ingredients in the recipe for life itself. We're talking about the chemical nutrients that act like fertilizer for the water. Yeah, just like a garden, the ocean needs fertilizer. Nitrogen is the #1 most important limiting nutrient out in marine ecosystems. Phosphorus is another one, a key building block for everything. But out in the deep ocean, there's a surprising ingredient that's often missing: iron. I mean, you only need a tiny trace of it, but without it, growth just grinds to a halt. And then for some phytoplankton, these things called diatoms, they need silicate to build their beautiful little glassy shells. No silicate, no diatoms. Of course, there are other factors in the mix. Temperature affects how fast everything lives and grows. Salinity, the saltiness, determines who can even live there in the first place. You know, corals need salt, lots of other species can't handle it. And finally, there's biology itself. If you've got tons of tiny little animals called zooplankton that are constantly eating the phytoplankton, it's pretty hard for a big population to ever get going. It's like trying to grow a lawn while a herd of sheep are constantly grazing on it. Okay, we've gathered our clues. We have sunlight, we have oxygen, and we have that all-important nutrient recipe. Let's bring it all together and finally solve this puzzle. The productive estuary versus the empty ocean. And this is where it all just clicks into place. The estuary is a biological metropolis for two simple reasons. It's shallow, so there's plenty of light, and it gets a constant supply of nutrient fertilizer from river runoff. The open ocean, on the other hand, is a biological desert mostly because it's incredibly deep, and most importantly, it's starved of those essential nutrients. It's not a desert because it lacks water. It's a desert because it lacks fertilizer. I love this analogy. Think of the whole thing as a floating farm. The farm completely fails if the sun gets blocked, if the fertilizer goes missing, or if the air just runs out. An ecosystem's health depends on this really delicate balance of all three of those things. The estuary has that balance, while the vast open ocean is just fundamentally limited by a lack of fertilizer. And that leaves us with one final and really crucial thought. We've seen how nature creates its own aquatic deserts and oases, but when our actions lead to nutrient runoff and create those dead zones, we are actively turning vibrant oases into lifeless wastelands. So the real question isn't just why the ocean is a desert, it's are we creating more of them?